So we're now going to add in the windows, and I have provided kind of a set of textures for a window. It includes a bump and a diffusion and a color. These are individual layers, and what you can do is individually load them into the same document, and then create a group and duplicate it over. But there is one nice thing you can use: CS4. You can go to Scripts and load files into Stack. Then browse and select those windows and all of those different maps. And that's if you're using non-layered files. Click OK, and it's going to automatically load and process to put all of those different images in the same file. And that way, what we can do is scale them and still have them matched up and positioned correctly. In this case, what happened was it did have a slight error. The reason for that is because the bump and the diffusion are grayscale, and the color is a RGB. So we need to convert the document over to RGB color, don't merge, and then we can bring that color map in. And it's going to give me a program error now. Not sure if I need to close Photoshop or not for that. So what I'm going to do is just close that out. So we can go back and try it again. Select the color first, and then the other two maps. And it looks like it's just really not working at the moment. It's normally very effective. We'll just have to take a look and set the layer order in order to get it to work correctly. And I did have to just close out the program and open the files and kind of just bring them all into the same document. Just doing select all for the canvas, copy and paste. And then I did have to rename them because of that. So we have the color, bump, and diffuse all in the same document. I'm going to select all of the layers, so holding down Shift. So select at the top, hold down Shift, select the diffuse, the bottom one. We can go up here to the top and select New Group from Layers, and I'm going to call this Window. And then we can duplicate the group over to the Building 1 Walls template. Now we can free transform this window layer to, or window group, to whatever scale we need, and it's going to automatically scale the rest of these images. And I do want to note, I did do a little more work on the texture. One thing I did, and probably one of the most obvious things, is if you double click on the layer, the duplicate layer that I had for color burn, I set the drop shadow to a color burn, which adds a little more dirt and grit to the overall map. And then reduce the opacity of the overall layer. I'm also going to decrease a bit of the fill. So we can go back to the window, turn that on, hit Control T, and then hold down Alt and Shift, and we can scale that and place our windows. Now, there is one thing I want to mention. I am going to hit Escape and cancel that. Hit Control K on the keyboard to bring up the general preferences, or you can go to Edit and go to Preferences, select General. I'm going to change the image interpolation to bicubic sharper because we are reducing this image and scaling it down. That way we're still going to get all of the individual slats of the window preserved because we are reducing the scale by quite a bit. And then we can hit Enter after we've reached the scale we want. These might be a little large for this building, so I can reduce the scale further if needed. And then once we have just the overall size of the one window, I'm going to go ahead and hold down Alt and Shift with the window group selected, and we can create a duplicate and just add another one over to the side. Maybe we can add one a little lower. Really just depending on how you want the building to be set up. Because of the overall scale change, whether or not the diffusion map is still going to work, we'll have to take a look and see the diffusion layer. It looks like that should still apply and work quite well. The most important is going to be the bump, which is going to be used to create the normal map. So now if you want to modify the other layers to kind of match this a little better, or add additional layers around the windows, you can pretty easily do that. So I'm going to do the same process now and just kind of add in a door. And this is the door with the individual layers, bump, diffuse, color. Select all the layers, new group from layers, call it door, and then right click, duplicate group, bring it over to the building one walls, main template. We can then close that out. I can also close out the other window. And the color isn't really going to match for this door very well. I do intend on adding another texture overall on all of the walls in order to kind of blend this a little better. But what we can do right now is just scale in the door. And place that not all the way on the bottom, because we are going to have that extra bit of extension that's going to go below wherever we end up with the ground. We'll go ahead and just add the door a little more over to the side. And if the levels aren't really matching up for the floors, I can just adjust the windows a little. We can also use the arrow keys to kind of nudge that down and adjust the scale as needed. So now we have the door in the scene. So after the scaling's done, we can go back, and I'm going to set my interpolation type back to bilinear. One thing I also like to do is just go to let's start with one of the windows, and I'm going to adjust the panel options that were just in the layer bounds, so we can still see our layers. And I'm going to turn off the bump and the diffuse for now. Select the color and double click on it to open up the layer style. Select drop shadow, turn off the distance, set it to color burn, reduce the opacity amount, increase size and spread. What we can do is change the angle to set it to 90, and then we can adjust the distance to just extend a little bit below the window. Modify the curve if needed, and reduce opacity. So you can blend together these elements a little easier and make it look a little more realistic, depending on if you want it to be sticking out or going in. For the most part, this is I want it to be a little more sunken in, and if we create too much of this effect, it is going to not really work very well, and it's going to look like it's kind of floating above the surface. So if we need to add a little bit of an edge, we could use stroke, or we could use an outer glow, adjusting the color to just a soft light maybe. Increase spread, set it to precise. And there's a couple of different options you can do for that. We could also set it to lighten. Just to give it a little bit of an edge. A couple of different things you could do for that. The normal is really going to take care of it, making it sunk in once we set that up. So if you wanted to apply this effect to the other windows, you could just right click on the layer, making sure it's not the layer itself, but kind of the highlighted area. Copy layer style, and then apply that layer style, pasting it onto the other windows. And we could do the same thing for the door, just for the color. And we really don't need to worry about turning off those other layers at this point, although we could. And I'm going to go ahead and just improve the overall wall texture of the background using some additional textures, the same methods as before, just to make it look a little bit better. Sometimes you have to use quite a few textures to get something that looks realistic, or customize your own, because at the moment it's really not very consistent. The bricks don't really line up very well, so if I have to, I can kind of create an overlay of that. But the additional maps may not be included with the training, just because there's going to be so many textures that I will probably end up using. And then we'll be able to start breaking down the template into the individual maps, mainly the color, the diffusion, and the normal for the moment. Because it is more of a distant, color and normal are going to be the most important. Diffuse won't be necessary, because we could even use the color for it. But sometimes having that extra bit of variation for the diffusion will really help the realism.